Slow. Okay. We are live. Greetings and welcome to the Saroth the Magic Experiment. Tonight I have Denny Sargent, an occult all-rounder, I would say.
Oh, I'm a wild occultist, I guess.
Yeah. Shall we tell him what happened last night? We did like a solid hour and a half of brilliant conversation, only to realize that I hadn't pressed record.
But it was a
Yeah.
great conversation. We had a
It
great time.
was, it was, absolutely. So, Denny, tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into magic, and how you came to write this book that we're going to talk about tonight, Werewolf Magic.
So I've been deeply involved in um, paganism, witchcraft, magic, high magic, OTO, tantra, all these things. I've been involved since I was 14. In New York City, I was in the middle of the occult scene in New York in the
Nice.
70s, and I was a crazy punk rocker with my friends, and ended up just diving into everything. Was initiated as a witch when I was 14. I had to get a letter of permission from my parents, which is that's a great story in and of itself. And expanded, started getting involved, reading everything that I can. There was a small group of us who were all teenagers, and we were all whacked out, and we read everything by Crowley, everything by Spare, everything by Kenneth Grant. Joined every pagan and magical organization. We were these crazy kids. We'd hang out and have a great time, and then and do a lot of magic. So I just thought this was a normal thing, and then I found out that no, the New York scene in the 70s was pretty unique, and I was
Yeah, I think so.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
I'm deeply into a lot of things. My daily practice revolves around tantra. I'm initiated in two different lineages: the Nat lineage and the Uttara lineage, and have been since 1980 was when I took the initiation into the Uttara. Excuse me, into the Nat tantra. And I do a lot of magical work with friends in Seattle. Golden Dawn, OTO, witches. I pretty much get along with everybody in the occult scene, I think. Well, I'm sure there's people who don't like me. So how the werewolf magic stuff started was I had a particularly rough time about 5 years ago. I lost everything, lost my wife, lost my house, lost my money, lost my job, everything all at once. And I was absolutely devastated. And as I'm getting older, I just was like, okay, I that's it maybe for my life. Maybe I'm done with what I need to do.
Yeah. I
And
know that feeling.
yeah, right. I think, yeah, as we get older, right? We've
Yeah.
all had those moments of like, okay, I'm done, right? And the gods were a little bit more kind to me. So I meditated every night. I do meditate every night, and I chant and all that. And in the middle of one of these sessions, this wolf appeared in my meditation and just sort of sat there, and I kind of ignored it, and I tried, banishing it away, and it just stayed there. And I was getting more and more depressed and more sort of losing my mind over everything. And at one point, I just stopped my meditation and looked at this wolf spirit that was in my mind, And I said, what do you want? Like, what are you here for? And it basically said, listen, you've been calling me with your, with what's going on with you, with your crisis,
Yeah.
and
With your,
I'm here
with
to
your
help
grief.
with your grief and your anger and your depression, and I'm here to help you. You are unconsciously invoking me. You're calling me, and I'm the spirit of the wolf, and this I'm here to help you. And I said, okay, I'm at the end of my ropes. Nothing is really working for me in terms of what I'm doing. And it just told me, like, get out into nature, go into the wilderness, rip off your clothes and let your animal out. And that's sort of the beginning of my book, Werewolf Magic. That's the intro of like how I ended up in this. You know, People look at this book and they think I'm crazy, right? They think, what is this? Is this a horror movie trope book? It's not at all. The,
No.
the reality is that once I started doing this, once I went into the woods and let loose, I felt 100% better, and it shut down my mind, which was constantly turning in upon itself and making me miserable. with all the things that could and should and would, as our brain does. And I was able to go into the woods and just sort of throw myself into the deep forest. And I'm in Seattle, so I'm an hour away from real mountains, the Cascade Mountains, where there's cougars and bears and there's wilderness, and that's where I end up. And what I received was this incredible flood of energy and positive power from energy by shutting down my brain completely and going into a trance state and just ripping off everything and letting my animal out, my animal beast self, what I call in the book, the animal self, which is right there all the time, but we suppress it every single day, right? I was able to reconnect with nature and in this sort of rough, explosive manner. And I came back, to my apartment, and I didn't know what had happened exactly. And so I started to make sense of this and started taking notes, and every time I wanted, the wolf spirit came and gave me another piece of stuff. What I realized, like into about 6 months of this, I would get some information. The wolf spirit would say, do these things, and I would go out and create rituals and go out in the woods and rip off my clothes on the full moon and do these things, and then I came back with more gnosis on what I should be doing, and so I'm going down this path. I have no idea where I'm going with this, but I know that I'm feeling better, and I know that it's helping. So then it started to click with me. So I many years ago, I interviewed several shamans, real shamans. Shaman is a term that's misused a lot in this country and in other countries, but these people were actual Siberian shamans, Olchi tribes people from Russia. And I had interviewed them, and all of a sudden what was happening with me started to connect with the interviews I had done, and I went back and reread them and articles I had written about them, and I started to realize what was happening here was that I was literally being contacted by a spirit, this wolf spirit, who was guiding me, which is how most shamans know they're shamans when they're really, really young, like 5 or 6, as animal spirits start to talk to them. And then the tribe says, oh, you're a shaman. And then they get trained and all that. So that was the beginning of Werewolf Magick. I didn't plan to write a book. I was doing this for myself. This was my own sort of primal Jungian psychotherapy or whatever. Plus I've always been a pagan. I've always been a lover of nature and into magic. And this was something completely different and new and very visceral and very personal. So I wrote all this stuff, and how the book ended up happening was I went to Pantheacon, which is a huge convention. It no longer exists, but a huge convention of pagans and witches and esoteric people in California. And I went there for something else, to present on something else. And my friends grabbed me and said, "Get out of your cave and function." And I went. I decided to get my act together, and I had several book proposals, and I was going to pitch them because I hadn't written a book in a long time. I've written a bunch of books. And if right now at the bottom of the screen, it says werewolfmagic.com.
Yeah.
That is my website, and that you'll find a bunch of my books there, and you'll find a lot of stuff that I'm talking about there. I also have Denny Sargent author at Facebook and also Instagram. So
it's at the bottom there as well. I managed to figure that out.
Yeah, it looks great. No, I'm really happy. It's really nice.
And
So
we should probably point out this is one of your artworks. I think
Oh,
I
yeah.
myself almost disappeared.
Oh yeah, behind
See
you.
the wolf, yeah.
That's the wolf spirit right there.
Yeah.
That's a painting I did with some of the symbols, but that is an icon. I actually have an altar to the spirit, and that's all over the altar. So I was never deeply involved with wolves before. It's not something as a kid I was obsessed with or anything at all. This just came out of the blue. And I thought it was kind of crazy, but after rereading my interviews with Olchi shamans, and after remembering my conversations with shamans in central Guatemala, Mayans, and also central Mexico, near Oaxaca, and just having these casual conversations, I've met a lot of interesting magical people all over the world. I've traveled to lots of countries. And after piecing this all together in my head with what was actually happening to me, I realized, oh, this is how shamans meet their spirits that they work with, is they just show up and knock on the door and say, hey, you unconsciously called me, I'm here. This is what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I had these proposals. I went to Pantheacon, and there was one on travel. I had all these books I wanted to do. And a couple of my friends said, you got to put your werewolf magic stuff together as a book. And I said, this is crazy. This is crazy. Werewolf magic, they're just going to laugh at me, you know. I said, and they go, no, just put it together just trust us. Just put it together as a short proposal and bring it. I was like, all right, fine. So I'd laid out these proposals to 2 different acquisition editors. And both of them pushed everything to the side and picked up werewolf magic and said, we want this.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding? Seriously? Of all the books I'm offering you, that's the one you want? They're like, no, this is it. This is it. So I was like, all right. I said, I'm gonna make a shot at it, but I don't know if there's a book there, you know? Well, this continued for like a couple of years of me just sort of getting more information, going out and doing the ritual work, trying things out, and then more and more came. And then, okay, so that's sort of my, you know, the side of my brain that's like wacky and artistic, I guess, and full of occult stuff. And then I have the other side of my brain. I have a master's degree in ancient history. I teach university. I teach linguistics and methodology and pedagogy and train teachers, if you can believe it. So I started doing research. I said, all right, if this is a real thing, then there's got to be historical research. If there's not, then we're just kind of, you know, Denny's just having, you know, a feud moment. And this is nice for Denny, but it's definitely not something that should be printed, you know. And what I found, and you've read this, Steve, you've read a lot of this, that there have been werewolf cults since the dawn of times throughout Western Europe. And I mean, I was shocked. I mean, ancient Greece, Mount Lycaon is kind of the birthplace of the term werewolf and the idea of werewolf. The story is very simple, that there was a werewolf cult there, and I'm looking now at archaeological stuff that's happening. They're still doing digs there at this temple. This is way up on the top of a mountain in Arcady. Arcady is one of the oldest areas of Greece. And this temple apparently has been there for 4,000 years, or at least something was happening there for about 3,000 to 4,000 years. And then, of course, they built a big temple, and over time. And this is way before the Hellenistic, you know, gods of Greece were sort of solidified. And a wolf god was worshipped there, and the king was also the priest, and he goes by Mount Lycaon. And you'll see the Greek myths in any Greek mythology book about King Lycaon and the temple, and that the god Zeus showed up and said, you know, what's up here? And to test that it was really Zeus, King Lycaon served him human flesh. And Zeus was outraged and turned him into the first werewolf, right? And then off he ran. And then the story sometimes says he was changed back. And then some say, no, he was a werewolf forever. And that's how werewolves began, you know? Yeah. So that I found down the hill from that temple was a temple to Pan, which was wolfish Pan, Lachaeus Pan, right? And so this idea of wolves being worshipped, being worked with spiritually, the priests in both of those temples were called essentially werewolf priests. In ancient Rome, I found thousands of these cults all over the place.
Romulus and Remus, of course.
Exactly, Romulus and Remus. Right, and it spreads throughout Rome. I mean, it probably came down from Greece too, but yeah, you have Romulus and Remus, who the founders of Rome suckled and you know became the heads of this, created this new culture that ended up being the Roman Empire. And there's a festival for that is the Werewolf Festival there.
Oh yeah,
for thousands of years they did this. Called Lupercalia. Lupercalia basically meant wolf festival for Lupa, the wolf goddess who founded Rome, right? And the priests who would go into this big ceremony and be blessed with blood of a dog, which probably originally long ago was a wolf, and goat, and they would strip down and be blessed with this, and then charged, and then empowered to be werewolf priests, or Luperci is what they were called. And they would run around for a week or more. The entire populace of Rome would come to this area, which is where Rome was founded, and have a huge party. I mean, it was like an ongoing orgy, drunken,
Sounds
lascivious,
fantastic.
for a week to 2 weeks, and these priests would run around whipping people with not fairly gently, I assume, with thongs of the sacrificed goat skin, the skin from the goat from the sacrifice, to bring fertility. It was a big fertility festival, and they would go around invoking the wolf god Faunus, who was the Roman Pan, but also the wolf god was the main deity that it looks like was the main deity involved in all this craziness, and go around and for like weeks, and people would just like would be drinking nonstop and partying nonstop, and they even the Roman emperor tried to shut it down a few times, and it was like no, it wasn't going to stop. So this was just a thing that happened, right? And everybody, basically their animal self came out. They surrendered to the pure animalness of the moment and just did whatever they wanted to do. And the funny punchline, I don't think I mentioned it before, is that when the church came in and took over Rome and took over Italy, they did their best. They tried to shut it down, Lupercalia. And even though everyone was Christian at that point, they said, no, we're not going to shut it down.
So stick some Christian gloss over the top.
It gets better. So then the Pope said, okay, fine. I'm going to change this to a festival of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, which really didn't work very well. And they still continued this party, and finally they took this, and this is people argue about this, but finally, because Lupercalia was right around the time of Valentine's Day, finally they took Saint Valentine, who was an obscure saint at that point, but a saint of like love, right? And they said, okay, fine, it's Valentine's Day. So when you're celebrating Valentine's Day, you're celebrating Lupercalia. So
next Valentine's Day, I'm going to run naked and get drunk for a week.
That's right. And you just tell people it's canonical, I'm celebrating St. Valentine's Day, and what can I do? It's part of the script.
I think festivals like that in history tend to be like a valve to the pressures of society, something we still suffer from, even worse today. We're so disconnected from nature, and it was like a reversal or a reverting to your animal self, just to give your monkey brain a rest.
Exactly. You pretty much summed up werewolf magic. The idea is to shut down your upper cortex, shut down all your constant thinking, your ego-centered, constantly trying ability to like think about the future and the past, and make up things that are happening that aren't really happening. And our brain is doing a zillion different things, but mostly what it's not doing is just existing here and now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm already thinking about like what am I going to do in an hour from now? And oh my God, the 6 things that happened yesterday. What did that mean? And this is a positive thing in some ways, but we've reached a point, I think, where we're so in our heads, and social media hasn't helped. We're so in our heads that we don't take moments to just sort of sit with nature and just like exist the way animals do.
And I think we're also divorced from our bodies now as well, because
exactly.
We're always in our heads. Everything's on a screen.
Right.
We're not experiencing the fulcrum of nature and all that kind of stuff.
And our body in nature, and us being not somebody who looks like, our culture has created a situation where we look at nature as a separate thing. Somebody just wrote me for an interview, and one of the things they said, well, how is how is werewolf magic, how does it separate us from being human? And I replied, I said, well, that question right there kind of shows the exact issue right here. When we see nature and animals as here, and well, we're human and they're animals, that's the beginning of the end, because we are animals. And whenever I have a group of people and I lead them through sort of werewolf magic trance stuff, that it always works. The more the merrier. I just came back from a festival where I got 200 people to shift, and they didn't want to come out of it because it was so comfortable. They didn't want to go. They went into that state of consciousness where this brain shuts down. It's shoved down into the unconscious, and your animal self, which is down there and chained up and is not allowed to roam in our culture. You bring that up, and then all of a sudden you're working with what Carl Sagan called the dragon brain, which is down here, which is essentially a survival from the earliest stages of evolution. We are animals. Of course we are. I mean, we are animals. We are hominids. We're probably not the last iteration of hominid.
No, I don't think so. I think evolution is still happening.
That's right. And we don't like to think that. I'm sure the Cro-Magnon and the Neanderthals thought the same thing. But they were much more, in connected with their natural self and able to enter that state too. So, I mean, all of these things, I explored as I started doing my work with werewolf magic, which I thought was, like I said, I thought was going to be a personal diary, and ended up being a book. I healed. I became a much better, more balanced, happier person. I mean, I think I mentioned to you before that if you saw a photo of me, like, 10 years ago, and you saw a picture of me now, you'd say, who's that old guy? And this guy must be, his son or something, because I am 100% different. I have lost a lot of weight. My hair started growing back in, which I guess makes sense.
I was amazed when you said that, but I guess werewolf, you got to be hairy.
My beard was bright white. My hair was white. It's no longer white, and I'm in 100% better place. I mean, I think it's really important nowadays. I've written a lot of books on esoteric subjects, but this book has really struck a nerve. I mean, it came out during COVID. That was part of it, maybe, but I am selling more of this book, and I'm getting more interested in this stuff than anything I've ever done, including, the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel and Shinto stuff I wrote about, and about ritualism, about global spirituality. I mean, I've written all these books, which are good books, by the way, and I highly recommend you read them all. but this one really hit home, and I think it has to do with the fact that we're all reaching the same point of like losing it. We're just losing our mind. We're so wrapped up in the constant barrage of stress and stuff, and it escalates. And what we're missing is the fact that we are not. We have disconnected from nature. When people say to me, I'm human, I'm not animal, what they're telling me is, I am no longer connected with nature. I'm no longer part of nature. And the problem is that this comes from the Judeo-Christian culture, hyper-capitalist, hyper mechanized, hyper scientific culture we're in, which is both scientific, which I'm a big fan of, but also deeply, deeply embedded with Judeo-Christianity, which is not scientific. I mean,
far from.
People believe in DNA and the apocalypse. I mean, so we're in this very weird culture. But one thing is very clear from the brainwashing we've had our whole life, which is that we are superior to animals, that nature exists. God gave us souls. Animals do not have souls. Trees do not have souls. Nature does not have souls, right? It's only us. And that we are in charge of everything. And we can use and abuse and chew up and destroy anything we want because God said it was okay. And this is, I mean, I'm not quoting directly from the Bible or the Quran. or other holy books, but this is essentially what it says. We have dominion over the heavens and the earth because we were appointed for this. And this delusion is destroying our planet. And as I worked my way and as I worked my way through writing this book, I kind of ended with the fact that this started off as a personal journey, and then I wanted to share it. But what I realized was that the real point of what I was doing was trying to reconnect people with Gaia, with our ecosystem. And what I realized doing this work out in the woods and doing this deep dive feral work I was doing is that the only way we can connect, really connect spiritually, energetically, psychologically, intuitively with nature is by accepting that we're animals and being in that state of animal consciousness. And once I did that, once I shut down my upper cortex and just simply was in the woods as an animal, all of a sudden it was like this vast, I don't know how to say it, this vast interconnected streams of light and power were completely obvious to me. And I was able to suddenly connect and feel the trees and know where the creek was and hear the animal. I mean, I was able to be part of the ecosystem in a very, very visceral, real way, not in my head, because your brain wants to filter everything, but just directly. Yeah. And I realized that, wow, now that I've gone through this and interconnected with nature, I can never forget this. And I can go around and I still have this. I accept my role as an animal within nature, and I'm able to interconnect with it and feed off it and feed into it. If this makes sense, it's kind of crazy ass stuff, but
it absolutely does. You mentioned Austin Osman Spare at the start there.
Yes.
And his idea of atavistic resurgence.
Atavistic resurgence.
Yeah. So what he said was that human beings contain not only the reptile brain, but like every single iteration of life from a single cell right up to and we can access any point in between.
Yes. So I'm a huge fan of Spare. I think I mentioned this to you. I've read everything by Spare, and I much of my work comes intuitively through sigils and through artwork. And I read that by Spare, and I understood it. That we recapitulate all of evolution in our genes. I mean, this is plugged into science. This isn't crazy ass stuff.
Oh yeah, no, this is
flat science. Mm-hmm. Our body is literally like a living museum of every stage of evolution, from the single cell through invertebrates and reptiles and amphibians and up through mammal and everything. So we are, I mean, just as a quick thing to talk about, we are 98% genetically the same as chimpanzees. 98%. We are 78% genetically the same as wolves. So it's all there. And I've done some work. I've done some deep dive work, trying to connect with my DNA, and I have seen and experienced that these things, you can have access to these things. And Spare just made it a formula that you could use you could create these unconsciously generated sigils and use them to activate, like the power of a tiger or a wolf or whatever. And I had never really connected it with anything other than, oh, okay, this is magical stuff that people do. Since I started doing the werewolf magic stuff, I understand way more what he was doing. The differences that I'm having, instead of saying I'm going to bring up this power that I can use as a person, what I'm doing is I'm saying, no, shut down your shut down this monkey mind, this ego-centered monkey mind, and bring up the animal that you are, not just say a tiger or a lion or something I want to work with. Bring up the animal who you truly are and bring it up and let it take over for a period of time within a ritual framework that won't drive you crazy. and it worked for me. I fiddled with it. I worked with it for years, and I finally got it. So I figured out certain things, and I've been adding to it as I go. And the main thing is, well, there's a lot of things to talk about, but we do. So let me mention Norse stuff a little bit, because I mentioned Roman.
Oh yeah.
So the Norse, and I hope everyone here has seen the Northman.
I haven't. I'm determined to now.
The movie Northman. The Northman. My friends made me sit and watch this. They said, "Your book is in this movie." I said, I don't know. And then they get to the scene where they're initiated as berserkers, which is in my book, and I talk about throughout the the Norse and Viking mythologies, and in the Eddas, which survived the purge by the church when they came through the North countries. The werewolves and shape-shifting into wolves was a very common thing, not just in the Viking world and the North world, but also in Greece, in Russia, in the ancient world throughout. Werewolves were just considered a norm. Even in Europe, the church accepted that, yeah, there's a lot of werewolves, and they just accepted it, and it was just sort of like, well, yeah, everybody knows there's werewolves, you know. Now it's just a horror movie trope. But and just to tag on to the end of that, when during the witchcraft trials, and I got a lot of information that I could use in my book from going through all the witchcraft trial documents, which most people don't do because they're pretty much horrible. But a lot of confessions were very specific about this. And a lot of witches claimed also to be lycanthropes, to be werewolf, be able to shift in werewolves. And what I didn't realize, even though I'm a witch, I didn't realize that 50% of all the witches who were accused of Satanism and evil during the Middle Ages were also accused of being werewolves. So this is like pervasive, right, all through the ancient culture. So anyway, I'm trying to remember where I was going. Oh, Norse, back to Norse. So in what the Northman has, which is really excellent, is a scene where they're turning into berserkers. Berserker. Everybody knows what a berserker is, right?
Bear sark, a bear shirt.
Bear sark. They wear the skin of the bear, right? But there's another kind of berserker called an ulf sark, and those are the two main, intense berserkers. Ulf sark means wolf, wearing the wolf shirt, and you had a choice of either taking in the spirit of the bear or the spirit of the wolf. And in that movie, they actually show the transformation scene, and the fact that there's psychedelics involved, and there's a huge amount of shamanic chanting, and there's a whole ritual involved. But they don't, just so everybody knows, like, you're not going to grow, hair all over your body and big claws, and your body's not going to reconfigure like an American Werewolf in London. Like that's a trope, right? But they do enter a fugue state, and this is what happens when I do werewolf magic. They enter a trance where they get rid of, they push down the conscious brain and bring up their animal self in the form of wolf or bear, right? And in my case, it's wolf, because that's the spirit that came to me. I didn't ask for it, and I wasn't particularly obsessed with wolves, but this is what came. And you enter that state of pure, relaxed being, an animal within nature, and it just releases all your tension, all the crap that's in your head that's not real, and you just exist. You just exist as an animal within your ecosystem. And Gaia, the natural consciousness of nature accepts you. Like you have everyone I've walked through this, they go through a moment where they're in that state, and afterwards they say, everything changed. Like everything around me changed. Suddenly I was part of nature, and therefore I was accepted. And this is not crazy stuff, because Native American tribes talk about this all the time. Tribal people I've met in Thailand and Guatemala and Mexico and Peru all say the same things, and I never understood what they were saying, including the shamans I had interviewed. I never really understood what they were talking about having to be like part of nature, having to see animals as people, other people, and you see this all the time in their conversation, like, well, the antelope people and the snake people, and then there's us, and then that we are co-citizens of nature. And therefore, and Native Americans talk about how white people came in completely blind and fearful of nature, of animals, and built these forts and immediately started cutting down all the trees and destroying everything. And they basically were saying to them over and over again, "You're destroying where you live. You're not connecting with the animals and with the spirit of the land and the waters, and you're ignoring them and pretending like you are the only creatures, and you're just despoiling everything, and you're gonna kill yourselves. This is what's gonna happen because you're killing us. You're gonna kill yourselves."
That's got to have something to do with the Judeo-Christian
Of course,
outlook that you mentioned
yeah.
earlier.
When you think God has told you you're in charge of everything, then you can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
And then tag on like, oh well, everything's gonna die and it's gonna end in an apocalypse anyway, so have a party,
The apocalypse is always just round the corner.
I mean, that keeps everybody, on edge, which is part of the constant stress that's driving us all crazy and making us all lose our mind, right? Especially right around now. So, I mean, I could go on about the werewolf cults. I found them everywhere. And then I went to other countries, and they're not always werewolves. It's not always wolves. It tends to be apex predators. So throughout all Western world and Europe, into Slavic countries, it was wolves and werewolves that shifted. People shifted into. Yeah. And in ancient Rome, the Roman legions used to carry a wolf standard into battle. And if you went to any temple of Mars or Ares, you would find the wolf. And so this was just a generally assumed, and the idea of a pack and all this was part of the way cultures were in the Western world. Yeah. Traveling around Asia, it's tigers, and there's were-tigers, in China throughout, and they believe in this. And I lived in Japan for 4 years, and it's where tanukis, and it's kitsune, were-foxes. If you watch anime, you see a ton of it. So.
Oh, anime is absolutely magical. I used to watch it with my ex-partner's 8-year-old son, and I was just like, Jesus, this is so occult.
So occult. Well, living in Japan for 4 years really changed everything about me, because I finally was out of this pool of our culture, and I was in a culture that didn't believe in sin. They didn't have an issue about sex, and they believed in spirits. They believed in kami-sama, or it's basically an animistic culture with an overlay of Buddhism. And my students would say, "Oh yeah, we believe in werewolves. We believe in shapeshifters." Like, they were quite serious about it. And I'd say, "Well, you believe in shapeshifters, people turning into kitsune, into foxes?" And they go, "Yeah." And I said, why do you believe that? And they said, "Well, what we believe is that there's just some people who have this genetic propensity. They can do that. They can shapeshift." I mean, I asked them to raise their hand. They all raised their hand. I'm like, okay, I can't say no,
Yeah.
And so you travel around the world, you get outside of this little Western Judeo-Christian bubble, and you find that the idea of people, there's a liminal world where people can be more than one thing. The royal family in Cambodia traces its lineage to Nagas or
the
serpent people, right?
Yeah.
And so I wrote a book about that too, Nagas. Through Tantra, I fell into that because I wanted to find out what was going on with that. So this stuff is like part of our heritage. It's part of our genes that Absolutely. You can, it wasn't that long ago that, ancient Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal and prehistoric men were basically, the religious belief system was what we'd call shamanism today. And shamanism, and working with spirits and working with things. And you look at the cave paintings, I don't know if I sent it to you, but the earliest image of a werewolf I found is 40,000 years old in a cave painting. And it's clearly a guy because he's got a penis, walking, on the wall, walking with a spear, hunting, and he has clearly the head of a wolf, and it's even identified as such, like werewolf, ancient hunter.
Yeah. Well, I guess ancient hunters must have observed how wolves hunt and kind of learned from them, and there would have been a lot of respect there because, wolves are great hunters.
Well, and wolves, of course, came slowly but surely became adopted as what we call dogs today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Man's best friend.
in fact, I just read a very interesting anthropological article that the guy had some really good proof that wolves that became essentially domesticated, decided to throw in their lot with people, may have been a pivotal moment where we actually survived as a species, because we don't have claws, we have terrible teeth, our skin is easy to puncture, and we weren't good at smelling, and they know that early, that wolf dogs that became part of very early groups of people, they found the game, because and even today, my dad used to go hunting. Even today, it's the dog that finds the game, the ducks or whatever, the mastodons or whatever. So there's some theories now that we wouldn't have survived without them.
I can see that we're completely intertwined.
Yeah, we're completely intertwined.
To take a different note for 1 minute, one of the things I really enjoyed about your book was I've been kind of in a kind of high magic, if you want to call it that, like Golden Dawn. You're reaching towards a god of some kind. Same as the lemma. It's like an ascension to a godlike status, more than human. But
Right.
what your book suggests is it's just as effective and possibly more satisfying to go down into your subconscious, into your animal mind.
So I wrote a book called Your Holy Guardian Angel and You, on basically how to do the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. So I'm deeply into hermetics. I do work with Golden Dawn people. I do work with high magic, thelemic groups. And so I spent most of my life doing that, what you're just talking about. I did the knowledge and conversation. It was a tremendous experience. It opened me up to sort of the higher realm of my own consciousness. But in all of these esoteric groups that are involved in ceremonial magic or high magic, and I know a lot of them, I've been involved with a bunch of them. Crowley, for one, says this, and they all say something along the lines of, if you reach to your angel, if you reach to God, you also have to reach to what Crowley called the blind creature of the slime. You can't invoke one without having the other.
Yeah.
And Jung said, the self, which we call the guardian angel, the holy angel, or God, whatever you want to call it, and the concept of individuation. That if you're going to do that, if you're going to reach for the highest thing you can be, the highest spiritual aspect you have to deal with what he called the shadow. And so we have such a dichotomy in our culture. There's good and evil, and that's it. There's black and white. But when living in Asia and being around a lot of Asian culture, they see that as yin and yang, black and white, but they don't see it as two diametrically opposed things. They see the yin and yang are intertwined, and that the yin has some yang in it and the yang has some yin in it. The darkness has light, the light has darkness. And the original image from Taoism of this was a mountain, and the mountain is half in shade and half in light. But as the sun moves, that changes. In other words, the philosophy is that you can't invoke your higher self without dealing with, quote unquote, your lower self, because we have this dichotomy of high and low. But you can't invoke your most sublime spiritual aspect without dealing with your animal self, which is an important part of our life. It gives us instincts. It gives us intuition. It gives us gut feelings. It interconnects. It's our body. It's our body consciousness. It helps us interconnect with nature. So I've spent most of my life doing, like you said, higher magic, right? And when things really slammed into me, and I really hit the wall and hit what I thought was maybe the end of my life, just being overwhelmed by everything here in this world, not up in the heavens. What saved me was going down and into myself and connecting with my animal self, all the animal DNA that is in me, which is everything, and reaching down and pulling up my animal self, my being as an animal, as a physical being in nature. And it saved me because we spend too much time up here. And this is a problem I see. I don't know if I'm going to say it's a problem, but it's an issue I see in ceremonial magic and magic today. Is so much of it has become intellectualized. So much of it is
highly intellectualized to the point of incomprehension sometimes.
For sure. And I understand that because I've written books like that too, right? I mean, but it's all like up here. But I also am seeing so many people who are involved in magic not particularly happy or balanced. I mean, I see a lot of people sort of losing it. Many are, but many are not completely. They're often disconnected from nature and everything. I end my meditation every night by saying, by honoring nature and saying, to you, from you, all things, because everything we have, everything we eat, everything we breathe, every important part of our life is tied up in nature, and a Gaia, if you want to call it that. And the idea is like, no, we have to focus on what's up here in heaven, and this is just stuff. It seemed like native cultures have said for a long, long time, and to me personally, like if you disconnect from nature, you're dead. Like you can take the meat that you eat and wrap it in plastic and freeze it and eat it, but that meat still came from an animal, even if that animal was put in a box on a farm and treated horribly and inhumanely.
We don't want to think about that.
People don't want to talk about, like, where does your meat come from? People are like, I'm against I'm against animal sacrifices in different pagan ceremonies. But they go and buy it wrapped in plastic. We're just so completely cut off from nature. So I like to think of this as something helpful.
Yeah. I know also you're sorry, could I just interrupt for 1 second? We've got a few people in chat. Oswald Spengler is asking, what do you think of panpsychism?
Sure. I'm all about pan. So panpsychism makes perfect sense to me. I mean, essentially, in a way, what I'm doing is very akin to that. I'm a big fan of pan. I actually wrote a book on pan. This is my book on pan, the Book of the Hornwind, and you'll see that it's
nice.
Ion 131 is one of my pen names.
Yeah, I was very surprised to learn that.
No, I have a
couple. A beautiful cover. I love that.
Oh no, it's a beautiful book. My friend, a good friend of mine, Oriel Defenstre, did the art, and it's just
Oriel's work. Yeah, he's fantastic. He does like wooden sculptures.
The entire book is filled with his art. That's just astounding. So I'm a huge. I actually have one of Oriel's tattoos on my leg of pan. So I'm a big fan of pan and anything having to do with panpsychism in terms of like dealing with like the whole consciousness of you have to deal with all parts of yourself. And our culture and our society, especially nowadays, is so top heavy. It's so the people who make the most money sit there and facing computers all day long,
Yeah, Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And well, I live in Seattle, so it's a lot of my friends are deeply into that, which is wonderful. But I worry, I worry about the fact that we are disconnecting more and more and more from nature. to the
Yeah.
point where we're destroying our environment. We all know we're destroying our environment. We've known since the 80s that this crisis was coming. And as a, we're not the smartest animals because we haven't really done anything to prevent it. And it's almost too late now. This is coming.
We're not. I've had some profound psilocybin experiences where I've really been told that we're just glorified monkeys and we have no idea what we're doing.
Really?
Actually, I noticed that you use the algaes, is it rune?
Yes.
I've got
Yes.
it tattooed on my finger here.
Yeah, you got the tear rune too.
Yeah, yeah. And I've got foo something. I'm terrible. I can't remember the names of the runes I get. I've got one there as well. But yeah, I was very attracted to. Funnily enough, it was a show called Vikings. Did you ever see that?
Sure. I liked it.
Yeah, yeah, it was good. So when I had this extremely powerful psilocybin experience, I kind of had to battle through it. It felt like I started way down in the murky depths of the astral realm, and then I kind of had to argue and spiral up. And in the end, I saw myself as a kind of wizened, leathery skinned Viking with runes tattooed all over myself. So I started getting runes tattooed all over myself.
No, I understand that. I actually have had somewhat similar experiences with connecting with my Swedish, Scottish, and other northern. I have a lot of blood in that, and the Viking stuff is something that I've. When I started doing the werewolf magic stuff, it started to come out in my trance states. That yeah, I'm wearing a rune too from I got in Iceland, which is I'm trying to remember. It's algiz. No, it's not algiz. It's the sideways. It's like an X with two caps on either end. It means day or light or brilliance or whatever. And I got it from some Asatru, some worshippers in Iceland. They are Odinist. So
okay, yeah.
And so I've actually like you. I've sort of reconnected, and part of I mean you can see some of the runes here. Some of these are new that I've added, but some are not. And you can see that one there. And I use these, and they came as I worked through this. The Wolf Spirit kept adding things to me. And the most important thing I found out over and over again, and it's something I've been doing more, is to stop. Is when I'm entering that trance state to not talk in English, because as I'm talking to you, I have 6 different parts of my brain that are all activating, all upper cortex stuff. As it's very complicated for me to think something and then say, I want to talk about the wolf spirit, piecing that all together, cognating, saying it, responding to what you say, is hyper intellectual and up here. When I'm doing the werewolf magic stuff and we go into a deep trance, no talking is allowed, because the minute you start cognating, you're out of the trance state. Yeah. So we use howling, like oh, it's like brings the energy up, and oh brings it down, and growling we use for banishing. We to the 9 directions. We're like and you can up growl, you can down growl. So we have all these sorts of things. I facetiously label as
wolf lingo.
Werewolf lingo, right? Yeah. And so once we're moving into it, when I'm teaching people this the first time, like at Starwood, I had 200 people. I was like, oh my God, I wonder how this is going to work. But I had to start with showing them, and their first howls were like, I'm like, no. You got to bring it down here, all the way down here. And then we would rocking, like these are all techniques I got from lots of different places, a lot from Seder, the Viking sorcery. There's some wonderful books out there too on how these sorts of trance states are initiated, and just trying things, getting out in nature and rocking. I use a deep drum to to help with the trance state, and then going into that animal state of growling and it's all laid out in Werewolf Magic. And even better. So like this is what's out there now, but this just hit the stores. This is the new one. And in fact, yesterday, good timing, yesterday I received my author's copies. Landed on. Yes. So this one is now in the stores. There's a lot more to it. This one's called the Shapeshifter's Book of Shadows because it's an entire ritual book, but it also ups the game in terms of the growling and the howling and all that, which the first book was sort of basic. This one I've gotten to the point where we're invoking the main god forms just with certain nonverbals, like the moon is right, and the Lord of the forest, the Lord of the trees, whether you want to call him Pan or Cernunnos or Faunus or whatever, is and then the Earth Mother is Ma, and the Wolf Spirit is Rah. So that's all the invocation that we do, So we everything is reduced to very simple things that just can be vibrated and understood and function on a very low cognitive level. You don't have to be thinking. It just comes directly out, from your lower animal self.
I'm reminded of the PGM and the long strings of nonsense vowels. I think they serve kind of the same purpose.
Absolutely, the barbarous tongues is what they like to call them. Yes, I've done the ritual, the Bornless One ritual, like hundreds and hundreds of times in various states of consciousness, and when that has always struck me as being super potent. When you're like, like it's just vibrations that don't have a cognitive connection. They're not words that you're trying to figure out. And I've always felt that was super potent and powerful, especially like you mentioned when you're having psychedelic experiences. Vibrations are far more potent and far more, than stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've found myself. I mean, I do like psilocybin. I do 2 or 3 times a year, but sometimes when it gets rocky and rough, I find myself humming a certain tone, or kind of vocalizing, but not in English, and it seems to affect the energy or something. I don't know. It's
Absolutely,
a strange thing.
Add like rocking and swaying, and that brings you down from any stress you have. So we do a lot of rocking and what I call rumbling, which is it's like growling with your mouth closed, like what animals do. They go, and we'll start with about 20-30 minutes of just all together rocking in sync. Meanwhile, visualizing our brain, our upper cortex, our monkey mind, like sinking deep down into the unconscious mind, finding that unconscious sleeping wolf and letting it arise up. So these are some of the techniques we use, and then once we get to that point, everyone starts to click into that as their animal selves come up. The auras, the energy changes significantly, and then we start going, and then we end with, like this is just like a way. This is a way to like bring it all up together, right? And click into something, click into that state of consciousness. And there's a bunch of other techniques that I've pieced together. I've looked at all like the witchcraft trial documents. I've looked at the Norse stuff. I've looked at the Greek stuff. I've looked at the Roman stuff. I looked at stuff from Slavic countries where there's a lot of werewolf stuff, and I'm finding more interesting and sometimes accurate stuff. I delved out deeply into ancient historians like Herodotus and Livy and Antonius and whatnot to find what the ancients, the ancient intellectuals said about werewolves, because they all believed in them. They all saw them. And there's so much in the Celtic world, and I've just barely started to scratch the surface there.
Yeah.
There's
Ireland has a huge tradition.
it does,
Mhm.
but so does Scotland. Has the Wolvers, which is like the nice werewolves. It generally in the Celtic world, werewolves were seen as like helpful, or they were warriors. And the word the syllables cu, which often people identify as a dog, was also used for wolf. So some of the great like Irish, heroes were cu something. They
Oh
were
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they were often referred to as werewolves. And I found a druid in Scotland who um, who tried to revive druidism after Christianity, during when Christianity was still moving in and not. And he took the actual Old English name werewolf as his, as basically werewolf druid was his name. I was like, oh, so the druids were clearly involved in shape shifting and
Oh, absolutely.
and all that stuff. So I
They
mean,
were in a culture.
it's in every culture. Shamanism is the earliest religion in the world, or excuse me, I should say
Oh, of
animism.
course.
Animism is the earliest religion in the world. The earliest things we found, ritual-wise, prehistoric stuff, have to do with honoring bear cults or wolf cults or mastodons, or that it was these were the most important teachers. And when I was in Australia and talking to Aboriginals, that they were very clear that it was the animal spirits, and not just animal spirits, but that the ancestors were these massive animistic forms that created all things by doing songs, by singing certain songs and walking on the song lines across Australia and creating the world. And each tribal grouping in Australia, each Aboriginal group, has a song for that ancestor. If I'm hopefully getting this right, this is what I remember in the notes I have, and that is their private song, and that they literally kind of tap into the song line they're on. So there's still a lot of cultures that have a very different view of the spiritual world and its connection with animal powers, that we have completely lost and obliterated, and just anything having to do with animals is considered negative in our culture. There's a lot of subliminal stuff, like people say, "Oh, he's a wolf," or "Don't eat like a pig," or
A wolf in
"Stop
sheep's
talking."
clothing.
Yeah, there are really stop monkeying around. There are really no positive animal slang terms. It's all very, very negative. And
Yeah.
anyway, so here we are. Here we are with werewolf magic. So I actually have a recreation of the Lupercalia festival in here.
Oh
It's
wow.
probably a lot
Please,
calmer. Probably a
please
lot
have one in
calmer.
Scotland so I can come.
So I have a bunch of rituals in here for like a pack to do, and one of them is like recreate a public, Lupercalia festival, and I have the whole ritual and everything. I'm leaving out the orgies and the massive.
Yeah, it sounds a bit kinky there, Denny.
I don't know. What can I say? The you know the only time there's really positive animal uh, slang and terms, it has to do with sexuality.
Yeah, you're right. Actually,
I mean, think
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
So like, but that shows our puritanical side. Like
yeah,
oh no, don't be a wolf, or like, oh,
yeah. Oh,
he's hung like a horse, right? I mean,
that's
we have all
exactly
these
the
terms,
example I was thinking of.
they screw like bunnies, but on the other side, oh, animals are bad. So we have this very
Yeah. Oh, we
weird
do.
view of sexuality in our culture that
Yeah.
they
That's
don't
what
have in Japan, which was interesting. There's
they
no
don't have. Like
sex
I
is not a
thought that
sin.
the Japanese were quite kind of prudish somehow.
No, not really.
No,
They,
no.
they're very quote unquote civilized, and they don't go around talking about it. We talk about sexual stuff more than Japanese do, but they don't believe that sex is a sin. They don't believe that any kind of sex is a sin. They don't believe in sin. They're not Judeo-Christian, right? And so people make a lot of sexual jokes they find it very humorous. You go out drinking with a bunch of people, and it's quite funny, you know. Yeah, they don't. They're not rude, and they don't talk about it all the time. They're very private, but they also don't think it's a terrible thing. They have love hotels all over Tokyo. I mean, you pay by the hour, and it's because everybody's in very small apartments.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
just to get some time with your lover, where you're not surrounded by family members, but they're everywhere. I mean, the first time I saw one, I was like, "What's this?" And my friends were laughing. They're like, "It's a love hotel. You can go in and you can pay, and you get your own private little room, and it's
Sounds
perfectly
lovely.
normal, perfectly natural." So
Yeah. The idea of sin has really screwed with the Western mind, I think.
what can I say? I'm not Christian, and so I don't buy
Neither
into
am
it.
I.
But it definitely has influenced my life because I've lived here, and I didn't really realize how permeated I was with the prevailing culture until I lived in Japan for 4 years and
Yeah.
realized, wow, it's everywhere. It's everything. It's the way we think. It's the way we're schooled. The way we're brought up. We're always taught that we are humans and we're not animals. We're always taught that we are superior to everything. That we can do whatever we want, no matter how badly we screw up the planet. Science will save us. And
Yeah. Well,
and
that'll be. It's running out of time, man.
things will change, but I'm hoping, like this book really delves way deeper into a lot of different ritual stuff, and I have an entire oracle deck in here, and I have spells and all this stuff. But I spend a lot more time in this book also talking about my ethos as I've done more and more trance work with the werewolf magic stuff. My ethos has really expanded to focus more on how important it is that we reconnect with our animal self. Otherwise, we just simply don't perceive what we're doing to nature. We don't understand
Yeah.
how crucial our interaction and our interconnection with nature is. And people go hiking and they throw garbage everywhere. They're simply not there. They're not in nature. They're not feeling the energy and getting
No, it's
healed
like
by the
they're
energy.
consuming nature like we consume films and we
Right,
consume.
right.
You know.
Yeah, they talk about where they went and what they did. Japanese have a wonderful term called forest bathing, and I can't remember the actual Nihongo, the Japanese term for it. But they truly believe, like when you're sick or when you're not feeling well, you go walk in silence in the forest and let the energy fill you is as important as taking medicine. And same with onsen, sitting and soaking in outdoor hot springs, and just, which I've done a lot in Japan. And people don't yak, much. They sit and they just go into that state of just accepting
Yeah.
the energy and healing of nature, and it's crucial. And we're walled off. We're mentally walled off. When
Yeah.
when when people believe deep down in their unconscious that they're not animals, and that animals have no soul, which is what we've been programmed with, then they behave very differently in the natural world. They do what they want, including pollute and throw garbage around, and
Absolutely.
take photos of trees and then not actually touch the trees, not feel the trees.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
You're just like an observer, but removed, and
right,
everything's for Facebook or your social media.
right,
One of the most powerful things that attracted me to Magic was it seemed to be a way of deprogramming all that
yes,
church,
yes,
school, state, government.
right,
And I got very into the Robert Anton Wilson,
yes. Me
Timothy
too.
Leary
Me too.
eight circuits brain model,
Yes,
where you
yes,
imprint at certain stages, and
yes,
it just seems
yes.
it's
Timothy Leary's
developed.
Timothy Leary's neurological model.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic. So with what it basically says is there are stages in your life where your imprint susceptible. Like puberty is one where you tend to pick up your sexual um, peccadillos for the rest of your life, and there's social stuff, and I think by the atavistic shape-shifting thing, we can break that programming and choose our own programming instead of having it beat into us by authority figures.
I agree. I have to agree because I mean you've brought up psychedelics, and mushrooms are pretty much legal where I am now. And I actually in this book, I actually mention the use. I basically say, look, if it's legal in your state, because America, and if it's legal in your state, you may want to try augmenting what we're doing with a little bit of mushroom tea. Um,
Yeah.
of course, if it's not legal, don't because you don't want to get in trouble. But I've had some experiences like that as well that were very, very helpful in terms of removing negative tape loops, removing negative belief systems and self-destructive things that we absorb from our culture, and being told that we are being compartmentalized into workers that do things that other people want us to do, and all these sorts of things, belief systems that don't make sense. So I think that I'm basically sure from research that every one of these werewolf cults involves some sort of gnosis wrapped around some sort of psychedelic, and also all the things that we know are important in terms of magic. Like what Crowley called energized enthusiasm, which is sort of sexuality, right, in action, and psychedelics and postures and vibrations and rhythm, things that have been used for thousands of years by the earliest animists and shamans to go into trance states so they could get direct information about like what the shamans I interview, like their main goal was to go into a deep trance state and find the game, find the deer, so that the tribe wouldn't starve, or go into the underworld and heal people, and it was being a shaman is a nightmare. I mean,
It's a pragmatic sort of. You're a doctor, you're a psychiatrist,
right? Yeah, talking to
that.
actual shamans, they're like, no, you don't want to be. I said, why do you think Americans are like all about getting a certificate and calling themselves shamans? And they're like, why would you want to be a shaman? It's a pain in the ass. You're tired all the time. You go into these deep trance states. It takes 3 days to recover. You don't live that long. Nobody wants to marry you. One woman told me, because nobody wants a shaman around with spirits coming around all the time. And I just think it's very funny when I see a lot of the stuff. But in a sense, we're kind of doing a little bit of this work ourselves when we go into this deep trance and can reconnect with nature. And not only can we get more positive feeling and more positive healing and more positive energetic, shifting and changing, like you said, being able to get rid of garbage in our head and programming and sort of find what the truth is in terms of internally. And our animal self has been ignored and suppressed, but our animal self is the most truthful, honest thing we have. When we go into a pure animal state, whether it's, whatever situation in our life gets us to that point. I mean, I've had this, the autonomic nervous system takes over. When my son one night I woke up and I knew something was wrong, and I leapt out of bed and into the room, and he had fallen behind his bed and was kind of trapped there. And I didn't know this, but my animal self was up in the room, pulling him up before I even was awake. And so that autonomic nervous system is, we always make fun of our animal being, but it has saved us. There's all kinds of stories of mothers lifting cars off of children. And that's our animal self. That's atavism. I mean, if you in my mind, I can't lift a car, but if something happens, if my kid was stuck underneath, I wouldn't be thinking. I would just be, I'd be doing atavistic resurgence and bringing out that strength that's in my DNA from past animals, right? And doing things, saving people, whatever. And then afterwards, when people do these heroic things, they're like, well, I don't know what happened. I just one minute I was there, the next minute I was carrying this guy out of the fire. And I don't really know what happened. And I shouldn't have been able to carry him. He's 500 pounds and I'm a little guy, So I mean, to ignore that part of us is crazy. It's making us sick, because when I do this, when I go into a deep trance state and I'm connected with my animal self, I know when something's not right or what I need to do, and I get very clear feelings and messages on what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. I mean, I just lost, like 30 pounds because I got in tune with my animal self. It was like, you got to stop eating all this wheat and you got to stop eating sugar. And it's your body, your brain is really happy about it. And your body's saying, this is not a good thing. So
Yeah.
getting in touch with your body, getting in touch with your animal self is important. I think it's really crucial. Clearly, that's what I'm writing about.
I know you've got an appointment, Danny, with one of your clients. How much longer have you got? Because there's just one more topic I'd like
No, bring it on. If I can. So right now I've got like 8 minutes before I have to start with him. So if we go like 5 or 6 minutes, I'm fine. I'm all set to go with him. So.
Tell us about the fetch, which to me seems like a servitor or a tulpa.
Yeah. All right. So and you know this in the Norse stuff too, right? So the basic way that in werewolf magic, I have a whole lot of stuff about it. But how the shapeshifting seems to have worked after going through all the historical stuff is that people would go into a trance state and work with their what's called the double. The author Cantu is really an excellent academic author. He wrote a book called Witches, Fairies, and Werewolves, and it's a really good book. And it sounds crazy, but it's actually academic. And he talks about the belief system in most of ancient cultures that we have an eternal soul, but we also have what he calls the double, and the Greeks call it different thing, and the Egyptians call it the ba, and all this. But that we have an astral body, we have an energetic body. Carillion photography shows that we have this aura, right? But in terms of animism and magic, we're able to work with that body. In werewolf magic, people go into trance state and start and visualize their etheric or astral body, as it were, in the form of a werewolf. Different cultures probably do it different ways. But once it's malleable, and once you imprint it intensely, then you can work with it. Now, as doing werewolf magic stuff, we go into this deep trance state, we come out of it, and we all assume we wear the skin of the wolf, which is exactly what this is, except it's an energetic thing. I work with the gut chakra and have people fill their bodies with this energy that can then be manipulated and worked with. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but afterwards, the last time we did this, I said, okay, what do I look like as a werewolf? And everybody in my group said, you're black. And I said, yeah, you're right. With a little gray. And then we went around and we all knew what we all knew. Once we were in that state of consciousness, we all knew what each other looked like. Brown and gray. I mean, we all nailed it. We all went, you look like this, you look like this. And so boom. And so that's part of the fetches. Like that's personally like wearing the skin. But fetches are taking that astral body, that energetic body, and pushing it out, away from you, and building it up and adding more energy to it, so it begins to function as an entity that can then be sent forth or come back to you to do work. And this is a really ancient system of magic. It goes all the way back. And again, I mean, I hate to keep mentioning shamanism, but shamanism, witchcraft, Norse setter magic, Roman magic, Greek magic, they all sent fetches. They all created these energy beings from their own energy form, built them up, energized them, and worked with them, and then were able to send them forth. There's also in this book some stuff, but in this book there's even more about how to project into your werewolf self as a fetch and do distance viewing and do lots of things. There's so much more to talk about, and because I haven't even touched like the connection between werewolf stuff and the dead, and that wolves with the dead. There's so much to talk about.
It's such a shame that we didn't have last night's conversation, because we've talked about completely different things tonight.
I know. You can have me on again. I'll talk about more stuff if you want.
You come on anytime, please, Denny.
Oh, thank you.
Can I just check? Oswald is a very clever guy and he likes to ask questions. If not too touchy a subject, does Denny have to deal with the more political pagans, identitarian groups such as the Wolves of Vinland?
The wolves of what?
The Wolves of Vinland?
Oh,
I've never.
well, I will say that yes, sometimes. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of right wingers, especially in the United
Yeah,
States, who identify with the werewolf, the
yeah,
Nazi stuff. And in both my books, especially the second one, but both of them, I'm very clear in saying, look, if you're homophobic, if you're anti-Semitic, if you're a racist of any kind, this is not for you. Wolves are all different colors and all different forms, and they all get along. There are wolves in packs who are gay. I mean, these are all things that you can look up and
yeah.
find. And so,
Absolutely, there are gay animals.
so, and I do get some political correctness stuff, but I also have a lot of caveats to cover all that. I have a lot of caveats in both books because
Yeah.
because we do use things, we do use natural things like occasionally drop of blood, or if people want to use sexual fluid, that's acceptable. This is a primordial thing. But I also say, look, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. If you know, and I have a lot, like people get into that state, and they are like, there's going to be some sexual feelings, and I talk a lot about consent and about appropriacy and the role of the alpha, especially in this new one. I have a whole section on behavior and how the pack should run. And the goal of the point of the alpha is to make sure everybody's respected and everything is okay, which is what werewolf alphas are like. There's no such thing as an official alpha in a pack. It can shift from wolf to wolf. The new stuff coming out is that an alpha is the parent. It's the wolf that cares the most. And when the pack moves, the alpha is the last person to make sure the sick and the young make it. I mean, so that's hopefully that answered the question. That I've set up a lot of sociological things to not upset people and to make sure that things are, because it's wild. We go pretty wild, but it also has to be responsible. Yeah. My neighbors may have questions as to what.
Yeah, I did wonder, like, what do your neighbors think about you, like, growling and howling all the time? But
well, I was worried the cops were going to come, and I think I told you this last time. They never have, and I'm out there. I've got these little woods, and I've got people around me, and especially when there's 5 of us now. And but I think I told you the story that one neighbor I saw was saying, "Oh, the coyotes are back in town." Telling me the whole story. Oh yeah, I'm like, "Oh good, I like coyotes," and I'm like, "La la la," and then I realized, oh, he's like, "Yeah, they're always here around the full moon," and I'm like,
oh, that's me.
I'm the coyote. But no, nobody's bothered us. I don't know whether they're afraid of us or whether they're open-minded. I have no idea. They probably think we're just playing a role-playing game. That's all I can figure.
Yeah, wow. Okay, Denny, I know you're out of time. It's been absolute pleasure. Both nights.
Buy them.
I'll buy them, even though you sent me an electronic copy.
Yeah. The new one's in the store.
I want you to sign them, though. I always want signed books, and I never get them because they're always like not the.
Send me your address, and I'll send you a card because I have cards, promo cards, and I'll sign that for you.
Oh, thank you, Denny.
Sure.
Right. Okay. I wish I could engage with chat a bit more, but we didn't even plan. We couldn't just figure out how to record. So please God, I mean, it has gone out live on YouTube. Let's hope we have the recording tonight, Denny.
Send me the link, and if you want me to come back, I'm happy to. I really enjoy our conversation, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're really a fun person to be interviewed by.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. So, yeah. and Facebook message me any links that you want me to put under the video so they can just click and find your stuff,
Okay. These are pretty much it. You've got it right there.
Werewolf Magick and Denny Sargent, author. Yeah. Okay.
Facebook. I got to run. Take care.
Fantastic.
Oh!
Love you, Denny. Ow. Okay, baby. See you soon.
Bye.
See you, man. If I'm still on, thanks Oswald and Promoted Firebird, and there was someone in called Lockie earlier on. I'm trying to get used to this bloody StreamYard. It's difficult. So I'll try and end the broadcast. It's very... Lockie LL. But we'll get him back because he's a great guest, is Denny. And I've got... who else have I got? Hopefully Matt Hadfield, a bit of a Grimoire expert. Alison Tchaikovsky, the great pentacle maker. Julian Vane, returning guest. It seems like I'm still broadcasting. I am, right. I'm going to try and... Okay, yeah.